Close your eyes now. Let your body sink into comfort. Tonight, we travel together to a place where sand holds secrets 5,000 years old. A place where stone speaks in riddles. Where the line between history and mystery blurs like heat waves over the desert. We won't rush. There's nowhere to be. Just 10 stories from ancient Egypt. 10 mysteries that even our modern world cannot solve. Let each story wash over you like the Nile's gentle current. If you drift away before the end, that's perfectly fine. The mysteries will keep. Breathe slowly. In and out. The desert awaits. The first story. The impossible weight of stones. Let me tell you about a problem that keeps engineers awake at night. Picture this. It's 2560 BCE. Somewhere in the Egyptian desert, workers are moving a limestone block. Not a small stone. This block weighs as much as 4 full-grown elephants, 15 tons of solid rock, and they need to move it 500 miles. From the quarries of Aswan all the way to Giza, they have no wheels. The wheel exists, yes, but Egyptians don't use it for transport. They have no iron tools, no steel, no machinery, no cranes, just copper chisels, wooden sledges, and rope made from papyrus. Now here's where it gets interesting. They don't just move one block. They move 2,300,000 of them. And they don't just move them across the desert. They lift them, stack them, build them into the Great Pyramid, reaching 480 feet into the sky. Think about that number. 2,300,000 blocks. If you worked non-stop, placing one block every 2 minutes, 24 hours a day, every single day, you'd need 20 years to finish. Which is, remarkably, exactly how long ancient historians say it took. But how did they do it? Some archaeologists believe in ramps. Massive earthen ramps spiraling around the pyramid as it grew. But here's the problem. Such a ramp would need more material than the pyramid itself. And when the pyramid was finished, where did all that ramp material go? We've never found it. Others suggest internal ramps, built inside the pyramid as it rose. Clever but unproven. Still others point to water. They propose canals, locks, systems of flotation, using the Nile's flood season to float these massive stones on barges, right up to the pyramid's base. In 2017, scientists scanned the Great Pyramid using cosmic rays. Muons they're called. Particles from space that pass through stone. And deep inside Khufu's pyramid, they found something. Void. A hidden chamber as large as a passenger airplane, sitting above the Grand Gallery. No tunnels lead to it. No passages connect it to the known rooms. For 4,500 years, this space has been sealed. Waiting. What did Khufu hide there? Why build a chamber with no door? We still don't know. The stones keep their secrets. The mathematics are perfect. The alignment is precise. But the method? The method remains a ghost, haunting the edges of our understanding. Breathe deeply. Feel yourself settling like stones finding their place. Story 2. The Sphinx who remembers rain. There's a creature sitting in the desert who might be older than we ever imagined. The Great Sphinx of Giza. You know its shape. A lion's body, a pharaoh's face, carved from living bedrock. Egyptologists have always dated it to around 2500 BCE. They say Pharaoh Khafre built it. His face, they claim, stares eternally toward the rising sun. But in the 1990s, a geologist named Robert Schoch walked around the Sphinx enclosure and noticed something strange. The walls around the Sphinx, the deep trench carved into the bedrock, bore marks. Deep vertical grooves, undulating fissures, rounded channels. Schoch recognized these patterns. He'd seen them before in his work studying rock formations. These weren't the marks of wind and sand. Wind erosion is horizontal. It smooths and polishes. These marks were different. These were the signatures of water. Heavy, sustained rainfall. Torrential rain falling for centuries. But here's the thing. The Sahara Desert hasn't seen that kind of rain in a very, very long time. The last time the Sahara experienced heavy, prolonged rainfall was during the African humid period. Time when the desert was green. When rivers flowed and lakes dotted the landscape. When rain fell abundantly. That period ended around 5000 BCE. Some evidence suggests it was even wetter before that, perhaps 10,000 or even 12,000 years ago. If shock is right, if those erosion patterns truly indicate water weathering, then the Sphinx can't be from 2500 BCE. It would have to be much, much older. Perhaps twice as old. Perhaps older still. Mainstream Egyptologists disagree. They point to the dream stela, an ancient tablet placed between the Sphinx's paws. It contains a fragment of text, possibly referencing Khafre's name. They point to nearby temples, built in Khafre's architectural style. The evidence, they say, is clear. But shock counters. The erosion goes deep, far below the surface. Seismic studies show the weathering extends down into the bedrock, in patterns inconsistent with surface wind damage. And there's another curiosity. Look closely at the Sphinx's head. It seems small, doesn't it? Disproportionate to the massive lion body. Some researchers believe the head was recarved. That originally, the Sphinx was a complete lion. Later, perhaps during Khafre's reign, the head was chiseled down, reshaped into a pharaoh's face. Why would they do this? Perhaps to claim it. To take ownership of something ancient. Something already standing when Khafre's dynasty began. There's even an astronomical theory. Around 10,500 BCE, during the spring equinox, the constellation Leo rose directly in front of the Sphinx at dawn. A lion on Earth, facing its celestial counterpart. A deliberate alignment, some say, built by a civilization we've forgotten. We may never know for certain. But every time you see the Sphinx in photographs, weathered and patient, remember this. It might have watched the rains fall. It might have seen the desert bloom. It might remember a world we can only imagine. Let that image settle in your mind. Ancient rain. Ancient stone. Time beyond measure. Story 3. The Boy King's Silent Death. Tutankhamun was never meant to be remembered. He became pharaoh at 8 or 9 years old. A child thrust onto the throne of the world's greatest empire. 9 years later he was dead. 18 years old, perhaps 19. Barely an adult. And then he was simply gone. The powerful erased him. His name was chiseled from monuments. His face removed from temple walls. For 3,000 years, Tutankhamun was a footnote, a minor king in a minor tomb. Until November 1922, when Howard Carter's candle flame flickered through a small opening, and he saw wonderful things. The tomb was intact, untouched by ancient thieves. Inside, nearly 2,000 artifacts, crammed into 4 small rooms. Golden chariots, alabaster vases, solid gold coffin. And inside that coffin, the mummy of a young man. His face covered by a mask of beaten gold and lapis lazuli. But here's what haunted Carter. The tomb was wrong. It was too small for a pharaoh. The layout was strange, oriented like a queen's burial, not a king's. The paintings on the walls looked rushed, painted quickly over wet plaster. And the artifacts themselves seemed mismatched. Many bore the names of other royals. Items meant for someone else, repurposed. inscribed hastily with Tutankhamun's cartouche. It was as if someone had died unexpectedly, and the court scrambled to bury him in whatever was available. So what killed the boy king? For decades people speculated. Murder, they whispered. A blow to the head. CT scans in the 1960s showed a fragment of bone inside his skull. Assassination, perhaps, by ambitious advisors who wanted power for themselves. But modern science tells a different story. DNA analysis revealed something tragic. Tutankhamun's parents were brother and sister. Royal incest, common in Egyptian dynasties to keep bloodlines pure. But this inbreeding had consequences. Genetic analysis shows Tut suffered from a clubfoot, a malformed foot that would have caused him pain when walking. His spine was curved. His immune system compromised. His mummy contained the DNA of malaria parasites. Not just one strain, multiple strains. He'd been infected repeatedly throughout his short life. His body was weak, fighting chronic disease. And there's more. His leg was fractured badly shortly before death. Perhaps he fell. Perhaps a chariot accident. With his compromised health, such an injury could trigger a cascade of complications. Infection, fever, sepsis. Tutankhamun likely died slowly, painfully. His body unable to fight off one final crisis. But there's a deeper mystery. His wife, Ankhesenamun, was probably his half-sister. They had 2 daughters. Both were stillborn. Both were mummified and placed in his tomb. Tiny coffins nested within tiny coffins. The genetic damage was too severe. The royal line was ending, collapsing under the weight of its own heritage. After Tutankhamun died, Ankhesenamun vanished from history. Some believe she wrote a desperate letter to the Hittite king, Egypt's enemy, begging him to send a prince to marry her. "I have no sons," the letter read. "Send me one of your sons, and he will become king of Egypt." The Hittite king sent his son. The prince never arrived. He was murdered on the road to Egypt. Ankhesenamun was likely forced to marry Ai, the elderly advisor who became pharaoh after Tut. Then she disappeared. No tomb. No record. And in 2015, British archaeologist Nicholas Reeves proposed something extraordinary. Using high-resolution scans, he claimed to find evidence of sealed doorways behind the plastered walls of Tut's burial chamber. Hidden rooms. Perhaps, he suggested, the tomb of Nefertiti herself, Tutankhamun's grandmother, sealed behind the wall, waiting. Follow-up scans have been inconclusive. The debate continues. But imagine opening that wall, stepping into a chamber untouched for 3,000 years, finding another golden mask staring back. For now, Tutankhamun sleeps in his valley. The boy who was meant to be forgotten became immortal, and his tomb still keeps secrets. Rest now like the young king, peaceful, undisturbed. Story 4. The Curse That Never Was. Let me tell you about a curse that doesn't exist, but refuses to die. When Howard Carter broke the seal on Tutankhamun's tomb, he didn't find any curse inscribed on the walls. No ancient warning. No hieroglyphic threat promising death to those who disturbed the pharaoh's rest. But people wanted there to be one. The story began with a canary. Carter kept a pet canary at his excavation site. On the day the tomb was opened, a cobra slithered into the cage and killed the bird. The workers were terrified. The cobra, you see, was the symbol of Egyptian royalty, the uraeus that adorned pharaohs' crowns. To them it was an omen. The dead king was angry. Then came Lord Carnarvon. George Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon, was Carter's financial backer. a wealthy aristocrat who funded the excavation for years. In April 1923, just 4 months after the tomb was opened, Carnarvon died in Cairo. The cause was prosaic. He'd been bitten by a mosquito while shaving. The bite became infected. Sepsis set in. His health, already poor from a serious car accident years earlier, couldn't withstand the infection. He died from blood poisoning. But the timing was too perfect for the newspapers to resist. A novelist named Marie Corelli had written a letter before Carnarvon's death, claiming ancient Egyptian texts warned of dire punishment for tomb intruders. When Carnarvon died, the press seized on it. Headlines screamed, "Pharaoh's curse strikes." Even Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes, suggested supernatural forces, elementals created by ancient priests. The story grew. People claimed all the lights in Cairo went out at the exact moment of Carnarvon's death. They said his dog in England howled and died at the same instant. Neither claim was ever verified. Then others began dying. Richard Bethel, Carter's personal secretary, was found dead in 1929, smothered in his bed. Murder likely but unsolved. George J. Gould, an American financier, visited the tomb and fell ill immediately, dead within months. Aubrey Herbert, Carnarvon's half-brother, died after having all his teeth pulled, trying to cure chronic illness. Sepsis took him too. The list grew. The newspapers counted 22 people dead, all connected to the tomb's opening. But here's the truth. It was statistical noise. A scientific study in 2002 examined the lifespans of everyone present when the tomb was opened. The average age at death, 73 years. For the 1920s, that was excellent longevity. Howard Carter himself, the man who actually opened the tomb, who handled the mummy, who spent more time inside than anyone, lived for 16 more years. He died in 1939 at age 64, of natural causes. And yet, the curse persists. It's too good a story to let die. Perhaps the real curse isn't supernatural. Perhaps it's psychological. The curse is that we want it to be true. We want ancient Egypt to still have power over us. We want the past to reach forward, to remind us that some things remain beyond our control. Or perhaps the curse is simpler. The curse of fame. Tutankhamun never asked to be famous. He asked, through his burial, to be left alone, to make his journey to the afterlife in peace. Instead, he became the world's most famous mummy. His face is on t-shirts. His gold mask is an icon. He wanted rest. We gave him immortality. Maybe that's the real curse. Let the story fade. Let the fear dissolve. Only quiet remains. Story 5. The Queen Who Became a Ghost. Her name means, the beautiful one has come. Nefertiti, Queen of Egypt, wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, mother of 6 daughters, one of the most powerful women in ancient history. And then, in the 12th year of her husband's reign, she vanished. No death record, no tomb, no explanation. She simply disappeared from history, as if she'd never existed. Let me tell you her story. Nefertiti wasn't born royal. She married into power, becoming the wife of Amenhotep IV, a pharaoh who would change everything. Together, they sparked a religious revolution. Amenhotep rejected Egypt's traditional gods, especially Ammonius-Ra, the king of gods. Instead, he worshipped only Aten, the sun disk. He changed his own name to Akhenaten, meaning servant of Aten. And Nefertiti stood beside him as an equal. In temple reliefs, she appears the same size as the pharaoh. In Egypt, size indicated importance. Queens were typically shown smaller, at their husbands' knees. But not Nefertiti. She stands equal. She wears the crown. She makes offerings to Aten directly, a role usually reserved only for pharaohs. Some historians believe she was co-regent, ruling jointly with Akhenaten. Unprecedented power for a woman. They built a new capital city, Akhetaten, horizon of Aten, in the middle of the desert, a city dedicated entirely to their new god. It lasted only a few decades. After Akhenaten's death, the old priests reasserted control. They moved the capital back to Thebes. They tore down Akhenaten's temples. They scratched Akhenaten and Nefertiti's names from monuments. They tried to erase them completely. It almost worked. But what happened to Nefertiti herself? One theory. She died in the 12th year of Akhenaten's reign. Plague swept through Egypt around that time. Perhaps she was a victim. But we've never found her mummy. Never found her tomb. Another theory, more intriguing, she didn't die. She became pharaoh. After the 12th year, a mysterious ruler appears in the records. Nefertiti. This pharaoh's name includes Nefert, possibly derived from Nefertiti. Some inscriptions suggest this ruler was female. Could Nefertiti have taken the throne herself, ruling as a female pharaoh after Akhenaten's death? Or perhaps even stranger, some believe she became Smenkhare, a male co-regent who appears briefly before Tutankhamun. Could Nefertiti have disguised herself as a man to rule? It happened before in Egypt. Hatshepsut wore a false beard and male regalia to legitimize her reign. The truth is lost. But in 1912, archaeologists found something extraordinary in the ruins of Akhetaten. In the workshop of the royal sculptor Thutmose, they discovered a limestone bust, painted with such skill, such realism that even today it takes your breath away. Nefertiti's face, perfectly preserved. One eye inlaid with crystal and black paint. The other eye missing, never finished. A work in progress, abandoned when the city was evacuated. That bust became iconic. During World War II, Hitler was obsessed with it, refusing to return it to Egypt. It was hidden in a salt mine to protect it from Allied bombs. Today, it sits in a Berlin museum, and Egypt still demands its return. Every year, millions of people stand before that face. Those high cheekbones, that long, elegant neck, that knowing, slightly amused expression. And they feel they know her. But we don't. We don't know where she died. We don't know where she's buried. We don't know if she ruled Egypt or faded into obscurity. In 2015, Nicholas Reeves proposed that Nefertiti might be buried behind the walls of Tutankhamun's tomb. That those sealed doorways hide her final resting place. Scans have been inconclusive. The mystery persists. Perhaps she wanted it this way. Perhaps she chose to vanish, to become a legend rather than a footnote. To be remembered not as a corpse in a tomb, but as an eternal question. The beautiful one came, and then she was gone. Like a dream you can't quite remember when you wake. Let her mystery cradle you. Some questions don't need answers. Some ghosts are meant to linger. Story 6. The Labyrinth Beneath the Sand. In the 5th century BCE, a Greek historian named Herodotus traveled to Egypt. He was curious, meticulous, writing down everything he saw and heard. And he wrote about a structure that amazed him more than the pyramids themselves. A building so vast, so complex that he could barely describe it. He called it the Labyrinth. According to Herodotus, this building stood near Lake Moeris, close to the pyramids at Hojera. It contained 3,000 rooms spread across 2 levels above ground and 1 level below. The upper levels were open to visitors, and Herodotus walked through them, marveling at the intricacy. But the lower level was forbidden. "The Egyptians refused to show me this," he wrote, "for they said it contained the tombs of kings and sacred crocodiles." He described it as more impressive than the pyramids, more complex in design, a masterwork of architecture. Other ancient writers confirmed its existence. Strabo, another Greek historian, visited centuries later and wrote about it. Pliny the Elder mentioned it. For ancient scholars, the labyrinth was real, tangible, undeniable. And then it disappeared. For 2,000 years no one could find it. Archaeologists searched the areas Herodotus described. They found ruins of Hojera Pyramid. They found traces of ancient settlements. But the labyrinth, that massive structure with 3,000 rooms, was simply gone. Some dismissed Herodotus. Maybe he exaggerated. Maybe he lied. Maybe the labyrinth never existed. But in 2008, a team of Belgian and Egyptian researchers brought ground-penetrating radar to Hojera. They scanned the area near the pyramid, looking beneath the sand. And they found something. A massive stone foundation, nearly 1,000 feet long, hundreds of feet wide. The radar showed walls, chambers, corridors, all buried beneath meters of sand and sediment. The structure was there, hidden, waiting. The scans matched Herodotus's description almost perfectly. Same location, same scale, same complexity. So why hasn't anyone excavated it? Politics, funding, caution. The Egyptian government is protective of its antiquities. Excavation is expensive, time-consuming, and potentially dangerous to the artifacts. The water table in the area is high. The lower levels Herodotus mentioned might be flooded, collapsed, or too fragile to access safely. And there's another reason. Mystery is valuable. As long as the labyrinth remains buried, it remains perfect. Excavation might disappoint. It might reveal less than we hope. Sometimes the dream of discovery is more powerful than the discovery itself. But imagine what might be inside. If Herodotus was right, the lower level contains royal tombs. Pharaohs buried in secret, their names lost to time. Sacred artifacts, libraries of papyrus scrolls, knowledge preserved in sealed chambers, protected from the ancient tomb robbers who plundered almost every other royal burial. What if, beneath that sand, lies the answer to everything we've been asking? The truth about how the pyramids were built. The real history of Egypt's earliest dynasties. The location of Punt, or the fate of Nefertiti, or the secrets of the priesthood. Or perhaps it holds nothing. Perhaps the chambers are empty, looted in ancient times through tunnels that collapsed long ago. Perhaps the sacred crocodiles were metaphorical, and the tombs were never there at all. We won't know until someone digs. And so the labyrinth sleeps, waiting beneath the sand, breathing in the darkness, patient as stone. One day someone will open it. Someone will walk those 3,000 rooms again, the first person in 2 millennia to see what Herodotus saw. But not tonight. Tonight it remains hidden, dreaming. And you can dream with it, deep beneath the surface, safe in the dark, undisturbed. Story 7. The Land That Never Was. There was a place the ancient Egyptians called God's Land. But a kingdom of legend, a realm of incense and ivory, of gold and exotic animals. Egyptian texts mention it dozens of times. Temple walls show trading expeditions to Punt, pharaohs boasting of the treasures they brought back. But here's the thing, no one knows where Punt was. We have detailed records of Egyptian expeditions. Queen Hatshepsut sent a famous expedition to Punt in the 15th century BCE. and she had the entire journey carved onto the walls of her temple at Deir el-Bahari. The reliefs show Egyptian ships sailing south, meeting the people of Punt, trading goods. The carvings depict the king and queen of Punt. The queen is shown with unusual proportions, possibly depicting a medical condition. The people live in distinctive houses on stilts. The land is lush, green, filled with strange animals. The Egyptians returned with frankincense and myrrh. With live myrrh trees they transplanted in Egypt, with gold and ivory, with leopards and baboons. It was clearly a real place. The Egyptians went there multiple times over centuries. They knew the route. They knew the people. But the texts never say exactly where Punt was. For over a century, scholars have proposed theories. Maybe Punt was in Somalia. Maybe Eritrea. Maybe Yemen across the Red Sea. Maybe further south in Ethiopia or even Kenya or Tanzania. In 2010, a team of scientists tried something clever. They analyzed the mummified remains of baboons found in Egyptian tombs. Baboons weren't native to Egypt. They were imported from Punt. By studying the isotopes in the baboons' teeth and bones, scientists could determine what kind of water they drank, what plants they ate, and potentially where they came from. The results pointed to modern Eritrea or eastern Ethiopia. The baboons' chemical signatures matched that region's environment. So, mystery solved, right? Not quite. Other evidence doesn't fit. The temple reliefs show Punt's houses on stilts, suggesting a wetland or coastal environment. But parts of Eritrea and Ethiopia are mountainous, dry. The flora and fauna depicted in the carvings include species from different regions, some from East Africa, some from southern Arabia. Perhaps Punt wasn't a single location. Perhaps it was a trading network, multiple ports and kingdoms, all grouped under one name. Perhaps the Egyptians themselves weren't entirely sure where everything came from, just that it arrived via Punt. Or perhaps Punt moved. Over centuries, the name could have shifted, applied to different trading partners as political situations changed. There's another possibility, darker. Punt disappeared. Kingdoms fall. Cities are abandoned. Rivers change course. Forests turn to deserts. The African humid period ended around 5,000 years ago. The Sahara, once green, became the wasteland it is today. Climate shift. Trade routes collapse. Wars erase entire civilizations. Perhaps Punt was destroyed, conquered by enemies, burned to the ground, its people scattered or enslaved. Perhaps erosion and time have buried its ruins so completely that we've walked right past them without knowing. Or perhaps, and this is the most haunting thought, Punt is still there, buried under modern cities, hidden beneath the streets of Massawa or Assab or Djibouti, waiting for someone to notice, waiting for an excavation that reveals walls, pottery, inscriptions that read, "This is Punt. We've been here all along." The Egyptians knew. They walked its streets. They spoke its language. They met its queen, traded with its merchants, marveled at its strange trees and stranger animals. And then, somehow, we forgot. Punt became a ghost. A place that existed in hieroglyphs but nowhere on any map. A kingdom that lived in Egypt's memory but vanished from the world. Maybe that's the real mystery. Not where Punt was but how we lost it. How an entire kingdom, visited repeatedly, documented in detail, could simply slip out of reality. Maybe it's still there in some other Egypt. Some parallel history where Punt never fell. Where myrrh trees still grow, and baboons chatter in the branches, and Egyptian ships still sail into port, eager to trade. But not here. Not in our timeline. Here Punt is a whisper. A name on ancient walls. Question with no answer. Let Punt sail away into the fog. Some destinations were never meant to be reached. Story 8. The Temple That Holds Lightning. In the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, deep in the crypts beneath the sanctuary, there are carvings that don't make sense. The temple itself is beautiful, one of the best preserved in all Egypt. Its ceiling is famous, painted with the zodiacs, stars and constellations mapping the ancient sky. But it's the basement reliefs that cause arguments, 'cause they look like light bulbs. I'm not exaggerating. In several carvings, figures hold large, elongated objects shaped like bulbs or tubes. Inside these bulbs, serpents stretch from one end to the other. The bulbs rest on pillars that resemble insulators. Cables or wires seem to connect the objects to box-like structures. If you showed these carvings to an electrical engineer without context, they might say, "That's a Crookes tube, an early cathode ray tube. You pass electricity through it, and it glows." Crookes tubes were invented in the 1870s. These carvings are 2,000 years old. So, some people ask, did the ancient Egyptians have electricity? It's a tempting idea. The crypts below Dendera show no signs of torch soot. No smoke residue on the ceilings, despite the fact that painters would have needed light to see while creating these intricate reliefs. How did they illuminate the darkness if not with lamps? And then there's the Baghdad battery, a clay jar found in Iraq, containing a copper cylinder and iron rod. Some researchers believe it could function as a primitive electrical cell. If the Mesopotamians had batteries, maybe the Egyptians did too. The theory goes further. Maybe the Egyptians used electrical light to build and decorate their tombs and temples. Maybe all our assumptions about how they worked in darkness, with mirrors and torches, are wrong. Maybe they had something we've lost. But here's the problem. There's no evidence. No wires have ever been found. No batteries. No conductors. No electrical tools. No hieroglyphic texts describing electrical phenomena. Nothing. Mainstream Egyptologists have a different explanation. The Dendera light isn't a light bulb. It's a depiction of mythology. The serpent inside the bulb is Harsomptus, a god associated with the sunrise. He emerges from a lotus flower, which is what the bulb represents. The entire image is symbolic, showing the birth of light, the sun god's daily resurrection. The cables are lotus stems. The insulators are jed pillars, symbols of stability. It's not technology, it's religion. And the lack of soot. They did use torches and oil lamps. Soot accumulates, yes, but ancient Egyptians also cleaned and maintained their temples. Over time, through cleaning, replastering, and simple air circulation, soot residue can disappear. It's not a mystery. It's just housekeeping. So the Dendera light is explained. Myth, not machinery. Except, there's a part of me and maybe a part of you that wishes it were real. Because wouldn't it be wonderful to discover that ancient Egyptians had achieved something we thought impossible? To find proof that knowledge can be lost, that civilizations can reach heights we've forgotten, that the past was more sophisticated than we ever imagined. We want the past to surprise us. We want Egypt to be more than stone and sand. We want magic to be real, even if it's just ancient engineering we don't yet understand. And maybe that's the real lesson of Dendera. Not whether the carvings show light bulbs, but why we want them to. We're fascinated by lost knowledge. By the idea that somewhere in history people knew things we've forgotten. That wisdom can slip away. That progress isn't linear. That darkness can fall even after the light. The Dendera carvings remind us. The past is not primitive. It's different. And difference from a distance looks like wonder. Whether it's a light bulb or a lotus, it still glows in our imagination. Let the light dim. Let the temple close. Let your mind rest in that place between explanation and wonder. Story 9. The Waters That Carved Stone. Here's a fact that seems impossible. There's a place in Egypt that was once a waterfall. Near the Sphinx at Giza, there are geological formations that shouldn't exist. Deep gullies carved into the bedrock, channels that look like ancient riverbeds, stone worn smooth by flowing water. But the Nile is miles away, and even at its highest flood, it never reached this elevation. So where did the water come from? Some geologists propose a radical idea. The Giza Plateau was once much wetter than we imagine. During the construction of the pyramids, Egyptians might have used massive water channels, artificial canals carved into the rock, to transport the limestone blocks. Water is an incredible tool. It reduces friction. A 10-ton block that would require hundreds of men to drag overland might float easily on a barge in a canal. And if you control the water level with locks and gates, you can raise and lower stones with precision. There's evidence that supports this. Maps from the 1800s show water channels around the pyramids that no longer exist. Herodotus himself mentioned canals. And in 2013, a team of physicists from the University of Amsterdam demonstrated that wetting sand dramatically reduces the force needed to drag heavy objects. So perhaps the pyramids weren't built with dry ramps and brute force. Perhaps they were built with water. Channels flooding during the Nile's inundation, stones floating on barges, locks lifting them step by step toward the sky. It would explain the erosion patterns, the deep grooves, the smooth channels carved into bedrock. Not natural rivers but artificial waterways, engineered on a scale so massive we can barely comprehend it. And then, when the pyramids were finished, the canals were drained. The channels filled in. The water disappeared, leaving only scars in the stone. But here's what haunts me about this theory. If it's true, the engineering required would be extraordinary. Think about it. You'd need to calculate water volumes, flow rates, elevation changes. You'd need to design locks that could withstand thousands of tons of pressure. You'd need to coordinate the flooding season, knowing exactly when the Nile would rise, how high it would reach, how long it would last. You'd need to understand hydraulics at a level that wouldn't be formally codified until the Renaissance. And yet, the evidence whispers, maybe they did. There's another mystery tied to water. The Sphinx's enclosure, those deep vertical erosion patterns that suggest rainfall. But what if it wasn't just rain? What if water from construction canals, flowing continuously for decades, carved those grooves? Engineer John Paluca proposed this in 2021. He suggested that construction water, used to transport pyramid stones, ran past the Sphinx constantly. Not natural rainfall but artificial flow. Engineered erosion. It would explain why the erosion is so severe. Why it goes so deep. Not centuries of sporadic rain, but decades of continuous artificial flooding. If this is true, then both mysteries connect. The pyramid construction mystery and the Sphinx erosion mystery aren't separate puzzles. They're the same story. The story of ancient engineers who mastered water. But again, we have no definitive proof. No ancient blueprint showing canal systems. No hieroglyphic instruction manual titled, "How to Build a Pyramid Using Water." We only have the stone worn smooth. And the question, what force shaped it? The stone remembers. But it speaks a language we're still learning to understand. Let the water carry you, downstream, into darkness, into sleep. Last but not least, Story 10. The library that burned the world. Let me tell you about the greatest tragedy in human history. Not a war, not a plague, fire. In Alexandria, Egypt, there once stood a library. Not just any library. The library, the Great Library of Alexandria. built in the 3rd century BCE. It was meant to hold all human knowledge. Every book, every scroll, every text from every civilization. Scholars came from across the known world. The library employed scribes who would copy any book brought into the city. Ships arriving at Alexandria's port were searched. If you had a book, it was confiscated, copied, and the copy was returned to you. The original stayed in the library. At its height, the library held perhaps 400,000 scrolls, maybe more. Some ancient sources claim as many as 1 million. Inside those scrolls, lost plays by Sophocles and Euripides, mathematical treatises by Archimedes, Egyptian medical texts, Babylonian astronomy, the complete works of ancient philosophers whose names we'll never know. And then it burned. Actually, it probably didn't burn all at once. That's the romantic version. The reality is worse. The library likely died slowly over centuries. Julius Caesar accidentally set fire to Alexandria's harbor in 48 BCE, and flames may have reached part of the library. Later, religious conflicts between pagans and Christians led to the destruction of temples and their associated libraries. In 391 CE, a Christian mob destroyed the Temple of Serapis, which housed many texts. Then, in the 7th century, Arab armies conquered Alexandria. According to legend, the conquering general asked what to do with the library. The caliph supposedly replied, "If the books agree with the Quran, they are unnecessary. If they disagree, they are heretical. Either way, burn them." This story is probably apocryphal. But the library was gone. And with it so much knowledge. We'll never know exactly what was lost. That's the cruelest part. We can't even make a complete list of what we're missing because the catalogs burned too. But we have hints. We have fragments. Ancient writers' reference books that no longer exist. Mathematicians quote from treatises we'll never read. Historians cite sources that vanished into smoke. How much Egyptian knowledge was in that library? How many papyri describing pyramid construction techniques? How many medical texts, astronomical charts, historical records? What if the Library of Alexandria held the answers to every mystery we've discussed tonight? What if there was a scroll titled The True Age of the Sphinx, or How We Moved the Stones, or The Location of Punt? What if Nefertiti's fate was recorded there? What if the architect's plans for the labyrinth survived until the fire? We'll never know. And that's the real curse of Egypt. Not a supernatural curse. Not a pharaoh's revenge. The curse is forgetting. Civilizations rise. They achieve wonders. They write everything down, preserving their wisdom for future generations. And then, through war or neglect or accident or zealotry, it all disappears. The Library of Alexandria is the symbol of everything humanity has lost. Every time knowledge is destroyed, every time books are burned, every time wisdom is suppressed, we lose something irreplaceable. Egypt's mysteries might not be mysteries at all. They might be answers that we once knew, written carefully on papyrus, stored safely in a great library by the sea. Until the day the smoke rose. Now we're left with questions. Stones that don't explain themselves. Tombs that hide their secrets. Legends that blur into history. And maybe that's fitting. Maybe mystery is what we're meant to have. Maybe not knowing is the natural state of things. Maybe the past should remain partially hidden, partially revealed, like the Sphinx half buried in sand. Because here's the truth, we keep searching. We keep asking. We keep digging and scanning and theorizing. Not because we'll find all the answers, but because the search itself matters. Every mystery we explore brings us closer to the people who came before us. Every question we ask connects us to the ancient engineers, The priests, the queens, the dreamers who built a civilization that still amazes us 5,000 years later. They wanted to be remembered. They carved their names in stone, built monuments to the sky, preserved their dead for eternity. And we remember them, even if we don't understand everything. Even if the library burned. Even if the scrolls turned to ash. We remember. And tonight, as you drift towards sleep, you carry their mysteries with you. 10 stories. 10 questions without answers. 10 windows into a world that was ancient when Rome was young, that was already legend when Christ walked the earth, that was a memory when Columbus sailed west. Egypt endures, not in answers but in wonder. The desert wind is blowing now, gentle, covering the stones with sand. The Sphinx closes its eyes. The pyramids settle into darkness. The tombs seal themselves once more. And you rest. Let the mysteries remain mysteries. Let the questions stay unanswered. Let the past keep its secrets. You don't need to know everything. You only need to wonder. And to sleep. Breathe slowly now. In through your nose. Out through your mouth. Your body is heavy. Your mind is quiet. The ancient world recedes like footprints in sand, erased by wind. Sleep now. Deep as the Nile. Still as the desert. Peaceful as the Valley of Kings. Sleep.